Sugar Ray. And I mean Leonard. Check it out. Yeah, the double K, you know, the brother who's known for his rap.
And I don't even care if anyone calls me a Sally, because I'm a snail and I'm never gonna fucking fail. And you know what? You're gonna have to bail me out of jail.
Now if you see me in the lab coat, don't think I'm just chilling. I'm rubbing my palms together. Got plans on taking the building like my nigga in it.
This is pure and simple racism. That's all this is. He's hoping that the people who support him will be ginned up and running to the polls to make sure that brown people don't come into America.
They follow the exact pattern that Hitler has. I hate to say it, with the propaganda.
Busting through the swinging doors with aggression galore. You learned your lesson before. I hope.
Where'd you get this weed?
6 months of sobriety. Nothing you want to say?
Do I smell like weed? No. I think I smell like weed.
You know, Nick can tell you because he, he went through all of this, and he took, I think you took from a lot of different people.
And if the beat ain't knocking you over, you know it ain't the beat. Guaranteed to be in stock, like these busters getting blocked. That's niggas be getting mobbed. They missing hip hop.
Is when he directed me and all the great cast and Harry and Sally, they compared him to Woody. When he did Misery, they compared it to Brian De Palma and Alfred Hitchcock. When he began working closely with children, they compared him to Woody. But what I respect most about Rob is his deep, almost suspicious love for kids, and he freely gives them his time, his money, whatever it takes to get them into the van. But you know, revenge. Do his work for kids. He's now Mr. Inside Politics. You see him all over doing great things. He calls the President Bill, Vice President Al, and he calls Domino's 5 times a week.
Say and spell your first and last name for me.
I ain't gotta tell you my first and last name. Most people know me as dddavid.
We're wondering
Do you
what...
know how long this interview is gonna be?
It was the first time in our nation's history where we as a people started questioning whether or not the government was telling us the truth. We believed everything the government told us. Then the Warren Commission report came out, and there were some people saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Over the period of 60 years, we have gotten drips and drabs of things that have poked through. And what we did is we took all the information that we've accumulated over 60 years and put it in one place for people to understand what actually happened on that day. I've talked to forensic experts. I've been to Dealey Plaza. I've talked to everybody who's still alive. I've talked to Secret Service people, people from the CIA, and we bring them onto the podcast and we lay out exactly what happened. It was definitely conspiracy. There's no question about that.
Jenny from the cul-de-sac, of course. She has a boyfriend now who's in the military. He's actually dead. She's died in Iraq. She moved to Patagonia. What was it?
Pasadena.
I guess it could have been pretty awkward when PETA approached you about joining their team.
I'm gonna go kill that fucking dog.
Rob has devoted himself to seeing the kids from birth to age 3 get the kind of nurturing, intellectual stimulation, love, really. Most people don't know where this comes from, and Rob doesn't like to talk about it. See, as a baby, Rob was routinely beaten by his father, Carl. On a typical night, Carl would slip into Rob's bed, roll him over, swab him down, and say something like, I'm thinking about hiring Maury Amsterdam to play Buddy Sorrell. What do you think? Well, the success of the Dick Van Dyke Show changed things. Carl started inviting many of his famous friends to son. And that list includes some of the greats in comedy. Paul Lynde, Dom DeLuise, Rip Taylor, Danny Kaye, Charles Nelson Riley, and Rock Hudson, whom I frankly don't think was that funny. Rob, it's been a great evening, and thank you for doing so much to make sure that no other kid ends up like you.
Thank you, Al.
Sometimes I just come out to gather my sick thoughts.
Legendary Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife of 36 years, Michele, were found stabbed to death inside their Brentwood home. Law enforcement sources confirmed Monday that the couple's son, Nick, who has a problematic history that involves drug addiction and homelessness, has been arrested and is in custody of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. So who is Nick Reiner? Here's what we know so far.
They know that David will go on stage. They know that David will go on stage.
The president has been using a fake White House set for some of his speeches. Why is he doing that?
So he can read the prompter without people seeing the prompter. Former President Trump's senior advisor, Stephen Miller, says this. It allows him to read a script directly from a face-on monitor and without teleprompter glass that can be seen on camera. The set also has fake windows, fake flowers just right across the street from the White House. Look, if former President Trump was called the reality show president, Biden's got to be the delusional president. I mean, a set with fake windows right across the street from the White House?
Yeah.
He establishes an authoritarian regime, then he sets his sights on his sworn enemy, the United States. And like the true KGB spy he is, he secretly uses cyber warfare to attack democracies around the world. Using social media to spread propaganda and false information, he convinces people in democratic societies to distrust their media, their political processes, even their neighbors. And he wins. Vladimir Putin is that spy, and this is no movie script. We need our president to speak directly to us and tell us the truth. We need him to sit behind the desk in the Oval Office and say, my fellow Americans, during this past election, we came under attack by the Russian government. I've called on Congress and our intelligence community to use every resource available to conduct a thorough investigation to determine exactly how this happened. The free world is counting on us for leadership. For 241 years, our democracy has been a shining example to the world of what we can all aspire to. And we owe it to the brave people who have fought and died to protect this great nation and save democracy. And we owe it to our future generations to continue the fight.
They know that David will go on stage, who has his ways about him, but, you know, they really want to know what's inside. Fuck Donald Trump. No, he's my man, he's my man. No, he's my man, he's my man.
Cut. Everybody cut. Look, would somebody please wake Sleepy Joe up? We've got to record this. Mr. Freeman, you're doing an amazing job. Thank you so much for being here and doing this for us, because as we all know, this whole Russia thing really needs to be top of mind for every American citizen. Joe, wake up. We only have the Culver Studios session booked for like 3 hours. So we've got to hurry this up.
I just wanted to tell every American citizen that the COVID-19 virus has spread very fast, and it's led me right here to Dairy Queen because I couldn't find the ice cream truck. Gotta band together. Gotta fight this virus.
Joe, it's literally 2017. Slow down. Oh, season's greetings, sobers. Did you know that this film, or I guess like short video psyop propaganda, was directed by Rob Reiner? Yeah, me either. And did you also know that a lot of these Russia allegations have since been disproven? But I'm sure you already knew that Rob Reiner was a huge opponent to Donald Trump. Very, very much a liberal. But you may not know that Rob Reiner was the head, kind of director, leader of the advisory board to the committee on the investigation into the Russian affairs in relation to them meddling with the 2016 election, as well as being responsible for all of the leaked emails and all of the leaked everything that went out to the American public during that election. All of which originally was put onto Donald Trump, saying that he was responsible for it. So at this point, we have no idea what to believe, which is exactly what they want. You to have no idea what's true. Although they've got some pretty substantial evidence to show that this whole thing was definitely a hoax. That includes more leaked emails where they very specifically say that this is the story and we are sticking to it. We have no way to negotiate the timeline. We really need to just continue to push the narrative that we've decided on. And this is coming from former CIA Director James Clapper, also former CIA Director John Brennan, who are currently the subjects of a grand jury investigation looking into their involvement in manipulating and setting up this entire hoax against Donald Trump as a smear campaign.
Fox News can confirm that Attorney General Pam Bondi today signed an order directing an unnamed U.S. federal prosecutor to take evidence to a grand jury relating to an alleged conspiracy to tie then 2016 candidate Donald Trump to the country of Russia. Now, this move, Will, comes just a couple of weeks after the Director of National Intelligence, you see her right there, Tulsi Gabbard, sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department regarding what she says proves there was a conspiracy to undermine Trump's candidacy and later his first term in office. This was signed by the Attorney General Pam Bondi today to take this evidence of an alleged conspiracy to a grand jury with the hope to get an indictment or multiple indictments. Will?
That is big news, David, and congratulations to you. Excellent reporting on being first on this order signed today by Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Really, all they're going to be charged with, though, would be lying to a government official. It seems pretty light. I mean, it is a felony, but it seems pretty light of a felony. Seems like treason. There's even proof that Rob Reiner was working on a 10 to 13 part series talking about the Trump-Putin connection and their relationship, and it's supposed to follow both of their stories growing up as individuals and then how things sort of come together. So some people speculate that this could be referencing something, possibly someone who identifies as the same gender as another person who identifies as the same gender having relations. But I'm sure there's a good majority of you guys out there that already know that Castle Rock Entertainment, which was co-founded by Rob Reiner, was responsible for the fake setup that Joe Biden was using during his entire presidency. Or presidency, allegedly. And as you might have guessed, since you haven't seen this series, it was never completed because many of you already know, as your feed has likely been flooded with information about it, Rob Reiner was brutally murdered in his own home, allegedly by his son, who is deranged and strung out on who knows what drugs, must have relapsed and lost his mind and just slayed both of his parents in one of the most brutal ways possible, might I add. And I can't help but wonder, what's going on here? I feel like this just happened with Gene Hackman and his wife, and then we were told that they died by natural causes. That didn't make any sense, okay? Future sobering story for sure. But then finding out that it was such a brutal attack, and there are so many different connections, so many things deeper than what the official narrative is letting you on to believe. Which is why I had to raise the question. Is Nick Reiner really responsible for this entire thing? Or is this an entire psyop designed to have a real vulnerable individual framed as a patsy? And with all of the eerie similarities between Stanley Kubrick, who we talked about extensively last week, and Rob Reiner, another world-renowned director, first of all, they were both born in the Bronx, and then both of them are also accused of manufacturing different sets, secret sets, I might add, to aid in some sort of government initiative, some sort of government program or plan, who knows. And obviously, I was not planning on talking about Rob Reiner this week because, well, obvious reasons. But as soon as this story hit the news, I was like, whoa, this couldn't be more of a perfect story for the channel, which is why I was like, let's go. All right. Welcome back to Sobering Stories with me, Saint Nick. If this is your first time here, welcome. We got some festivities going on. I appreciate you clicking on the thumbnail and giving me a chance. I've got a bunch of other stories, if you like this one, that I think you will also like as well, also too. I'll link a bunch of them in the description. I'll throw some cards in the video. But anyways, just make sure that if you do like the video that you hit that like button. If you do like the video, please subscribe. And if you do subscribe, please make sure that you hit that notification bell. I don't foresee it happening with this video because, well, there's nothing out right now in terms of information. We just have tons of news reports to go off of, descriptions of scenes, secondhand accounts of what happened, but there's no autopsy, no crime scene photos, nothing that would really risk me having to censor anything. But typically I do have to censor things. So if you are wanting to get uncensored content, raw content, sometimes they're extended videos because they have clips that YouTube won't allow me to put in there, then go over to my Patreon. It's a way better place to see the videos in their true form. It's also a great way to support me, my little family, and the channel, just in general. You can also be a member, a Super Sober, here on YouTube. That also supports me and my little family. And it's another way for you to get uncensored, uncut, early access to my videos. And I certainly appreciate all of my members, all of my patrons. You guys are amazing. Oh, and if you're a returning subscriber, sub sobers. If you're looking for some cool merch ideas for family members or people you know that watches the channel, there's some cool merch I've got up on the website in my shopping area. And I also work at a t-shirt shop, so some of the merch actually comes from there, not all of it. But yeah, great way to support the channel and could be a great Christmas gift idea if you know somebody who just loves the channel. Yeah. We don't really have a sponsor this week, but I did want to tell you if the entire studio, as well as me and everything around me, starts just lifting up and blowing away, it's because I'm experiencing some extremely high winds outside, and it sounds really ominous. I'm not stoked to go pick up my trash later, but sorry if that's audible in the video. I don't know how good my microphone really is. Now, if you're not familiar with Rob Reiner, who he is, I'm sure you're familiar with some of his films because he's written and directed some of the most, iconic and cult classic films over the last 20, 30 years. Princess Bride probably being the most notorious film, in my opinion. When Harry Met Sally, another great film. He did the whole mockumentary thing with This Is Spinal Tap, essentially inventing the entire mockumentary genre. He really got his start, though, as Meathead from the show All in the Family, which he was on the show for all 8 seasons. Rob Reiner was born on March 6th, 1947, in the Bronx, New York, which I also thought was weird because Stanley Kubrick, another phenomenal, legendary, timeless director, was also born in the Bronx, New York, which we talked about last week. Definitely watch that video if you haven't. It would seem that Rob was destined for stardom right out the gates because his parents were both involved in acting, singing, Hollywood. His mom, Estelle, was an actress and a singer, and his dad, Carl Reiner, was a famous actor and comedian. So there was a lot of intense pressure for him to live up to these 2 massive names. He certainly did. Like I mentioned, he had some amazing initial films. This Is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride. But then in 1987, he founded or co-founded Castle Rock Entertainment. Movies from here would just continue to get better and better. We've got When Harry Met Sally, the psychological thriller based on the Stephen King novel Misery. And interesting little fun fact for you guys, he says he got the name Castle Rock from the artificial made-up town that Stephen King often includes in his stories. Also, another fun fact for you guys, I live very close to Castle Rock, which I've already told you guys about. Talking about Paul Myhill, he lives like 20 minutes north of me, and he's the guy from the Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, Silent Children deep dive, who I was like, what? This guy lives right next to me? But he was leading the entire project with his traffic jam campaign, and he was the guy in the trailer in the promotional video for the Silent Children project. So Castle Rock is not very far away from me. So that already was a little strange. And there actually is a rock that looks like a castle there, yes. He also produced amazing movies like A Few Good Men. Probably the most interesting movie that he made, in my opinion, is The American President. Because in this film, he recreated an entire Oval Office that was supposed to mimic the real Oval Office. And this set was used for multiple other films. It wasn't just taken down after this movie was over because of how well it was recreated. Or you could say that it was no longer used because it was actually being used for the new Biden fake presidency I don't even know what they were doing with this fake Oval Office. Makes very little sense. What they say was happening is they just wanted a controlled environment that they didn't have to mess with a historical piece and part of the White House. Okay, sure, likely story. Why keep it a secret? Why not just be like, hey, this is why we're doing it and this is what's going on? They denied and denied and denied. Reuters put out a this is false claim over and over. And then now that Trump's in office, we've got people in his staff exposing all of this stuff, proving that it is in fact real. So it's super weird, super strange, and I found some interesting proofs to show that this is the actual case.
You guys, I just finished a show. Look at the room that they put me in. We're in Biden's fake Oval Office, everybody. And I've actually figured this out. I now know why. I now get it. Turn the camera around. There is a screen, teleprompter to the face. All I can say is the last administration was a disgrace.
Just wanting to warn everyone today that the Benny Show is coming to you live from inside of a very special and historic location, the fake Joe Biden White House set. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's where we're going to be at today. Tune in live. We did it, Joe.
I've got to show you some hilarious footage that has been revealed of the fake Oval Office that President Biden used during his term. The stage set up in an auditorium in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. Well, it basically confirms everything we kind of thought about what was going on about Joe Biden and that he was fine. Meanwhile, his whole presidency was basically shot in this kind of Truman Show movie studio. What do you make of it?
Yes, well, look, we knew that that was a fake Oval Office, and I guess now that we've been, or some reporters have been allowed to go and check it out, it's pretty clear why it was like that, because it was a sort of an easy set with a huge teleprompter that Joe Biden could squint at and try to read. His entire first election campaign and then his presidency was like the Truman Show. It was fake.
The president has been using a fake White House set for some of his speeches. Why is he doing that?
So he can read the prompter without people seeing the prompter. Former President Trump's senior advisor, Stephen Miller, says this. It allows him to read a script directly from a face on monitor and without teleprompter glass that can be seen on camera. The set also has fake windows, fake flowers just right across the street from the White House. Look, if former President Trump was called the reality show president, Biden's got to be the delusional president. I mean, a set with fake windows right across the street from the White House?
Yeah.
May God protect our troops. My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. My fellow Americans, when I ran for president, I was told the days of bipartisanship are over. I'm speaking to you tonight from the Oval Office. Before I begin, let me speak to important news from earlier today.
Now, we could go on and on talking about Rob's directorial career and his acting career, but I feel like there's a lot more interesting stuff to dive into. He was also a very active political activist. In fact, he was probably one of the loudest voices against Trump up until this day, or up until a few days ago, I should say. He was very, very active on social media, speaking out against him. He was also the head chair lead on the board of advisors for the Investigate Russia committee that was started to investigate Trump for all of these, manipulations and leaks that were supposedly going on during the 2016 election. All of which have now been proven to be democratically motivated, including people like Hillary Clinton, President Obama, Joe Biden. These were all people who were involved in creating this whole narrative around the Russia incident and blaming them for interfering and attacking America when none of that was ever proven to be true. They never provided any evidence, nothing. And then this whole committee for the investigation turned into a propaganda campaign, essentially just trying to smear Trump and villainize Russia, fear-mongering during this entire election period, trying to brainwash every single member of the American public.
Tell us, David, how you guys came together on this and who's funding this exactly?
Well, this is a great initiative by Rob Reiner. I mean, one of the things that he brings to this is many of us in the media world. I'm a journalist. I work at The Atlantic. We follow the story minute by minute, but there are a lot of people who have other things to do than follow the news minute by minute. And you can easily get lost. And not only can you get lost, but you can become vulnerable to rumor.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the things that Rob Reiner is bringing his communication skill to bear on is not just accessibility, but also reliability.
Yeah, who's funding you guys? Who's funding this?
Well, we have a number of funders. You know, I mean, we start out with a very small amount of money, and hopefully, as time goes by, we're going to need a lot more to keep going. So, if you have a few dollars, I'll take whatever you have.
Individual donors,
I'm joking,
though, or
obviously.
do you have any institutional funding or any funding from any families? Or
No. It's just individuals that have funded it. And what occurred to me is that, you know, we've always seen America come together whenever we've been attacked, whether it's been Pearl Harbor or 9/11. Here we are attacked by a foreign power, and we don't come together. We are so divided as a country that I started to reach essentially across the aisle to my Republican friends and people who I respect, and found out that they are just as mortified as I am, that we as a country have not come together over being attacked by, like I say, a foreign enemy power. So David and James Clapper and Max Boot and a number of other people have said, yes, this is something we need to do.
Rob and Michele were also extremely active in different programs aimed at assisting children, which, of course, in most of the stories we cover, always seems to be a really strange piece of the puzzle that never quite feels right. And the same is true here. In one of their campaigns called the I Am Your Child campaign, they were trying to gain momentum through having really high-profile figures support the cause. And some of these high-profile figures, well, they're pretty interesting names that you'll probably recognize. Some names including people like Bill and Hillary Clinton, Tom Hanks and Billy Crystal. We've also got corporate sponsors for this event, like the super amazing, trustworthy Johnson & Johnson, who we discussed their entire dark history a few weeks ago. And we've also got AT&T, just a whole star-studded cast. And this event is being held at the White House. So that's pretty interesting. This event's being held at the White House. Why does Rob Reiner have such intense connections with politicians? He's a Hollywood director. And they even use this star-studded cast to make an ABC special presenting this information and promoting this campaign. Look at all the names on here.
George, watch the Godspeed swim. They swam, they swam.
From birth to age 3 are the most important years in a child's brain development. The time that defines who they become.
He also was a huge advocate in getting Proposition 10 passed in California, which raised taxes on tobacco products, alcohol, any sort of extracurricular products. So you can thank him for that. And this money was intended to go to child education reform, just benefiting kids in some way through giving them more money for education. But do we really know where our tax dollars end up? The same thing happened here in Colorado for working on the roads and education, and the roads are still messed up. I don't know. Nothing seems different with the education stuff.
The governor of Colorado is a weak and pathetic man who was run by Tren de Aragua, the criminals from Venezuela, took over sections of Colorado.
But I'm not a teacher, so if it's different for you, leave it in the comments. I'm curious. But yeah, I don't know. It could just be a way to fund more money to the state. And Rob Reiner clearly is a politically motivated and connected individual. Just like in World War II with the Third Reich, they had their very own propaganda team. They had their very own people in charge of spreading and manipulating people through televised propaganda, printed propaganda. Nowadays, we have social media and the internet propaganda, and it seems like Rob Reiner might have been their guy for that. So I had a few different thoughts as to what could have happened to him. Why would they have done this to him? Especially if he was working for the liberal side, which is typically the side we see carrying these things out. If he's their guy, why do this to him? And then I realized that this whole grand jury investigation is going on with James Clapper and John Brennan. Rob Reiner was directly involved with even doing this huge interview, pushing even more propaganda about this Russian involvement, putting fear in people's hearts about the whole Russian attack on America and how they're manipulating our political system to try and tear everything down. Just fear-mongering, just like they had done during the Cold War for 50, 80 years. I don't even know how long the Cold War went on. Forever. Okay, I think it was like 44 years, but still, forever.
The Russians, and this goes back to the Soviet era, there's a long history of them intervening and influencing elections, theirs and other people's. Historical records that they've attempted to interfere in virtually all of our national elections since the 60s.
I don't think we have fully understood the power of what it could do.
And it is very likely that through this grand jury investigation into James Clapper and John Brennan, who were members of this committee to investigate Russia, the lead board member for the board of advisors of this committee, someone who funded a majority of this campaign and this investigation, was Rob Reiner. So it's very likely he was going to be indicted if this grand jury investigation finds reason to indict these guys, and many other people for that matter. So it might mean something, might mean nothing, but I personally think he was going to be indicted. He was the leader of the advisory board for this committee. Come on. And why is that important? Well, just a couple of years ago in 2023, he released a podcast dedicated to discussing how the JFK thing was an obvious cover-up. Nobody questions that anymore. And he's got proofs showing what really happened.
We're running over on time, but for all the people with questions out there, you feel that in the end, there is a provable empirical answer?
Yeah, well, there's a provable empirical answer about whether or not it was a conspiracy. It was definitely conspiracy. There's no question about that. Who actually shot? We name them in the podcast. We say the positions they were in. We have a good guess as to who they were based on all the research. I've been researching this on and off for 60 years. I've talked to forensic experts. I've been to Dealey Plaza. I've talked to everybody who's still alive. I've talked to Secret Service people from the CIA, and we bring them onto the podcast and we lay out exactly what happened.
So he's obviously willing to talk about secrets that he probably shouldn't be talking about. And he's extremely close with the government, extremely close with the Liberal Party. But the thing that hit me the hardest was Trump's reaction to what happened with Reiner. It was definitely insensitive and certainly uncalled for. But with the consistent back and forth that's been going on, we just went through the Charlie Kirk experience, which completely set everybody against each other. Democrats, Republicans, it just set everybody against each other and made everybody nervous to exchange ideas. And now to fuel that fire even further, we've got this random Brown University shooting, and then we now have this crazy graphic unaliving of Rob Reiner and his wife, and he's extremely liberal. So it almost seems like they're trying to paint this picture that it was a retaliation against this whole Charlie Kirk thing. It's just constantly politically motivated back and forth, which got me thinking, how politically motivated was this whole situation? What do we know really about what happened to Rob Reiner and his wife Michele? Well, starting on December 13th, Conan O'Brien's hosting a holiday party in which Rob Reiner and Michele were invited to. They were really worried about Nick because up until this point, he'd been to rehab like 18 times, which is a lot. So he was fresh out of rehab, but it seemed like he was starting to relapse at this point, and they were really worried about him, so they asked if they could bring him with so that they could keep an eye on him. While he's at this Conan O'Brien holiday party, he's extraordinarily awkward. People at the party recall him acting really strange, being really intrusive, asking strange questions like, "Are you famous? Are you famous?" Kind of just annoying people, to the point where it was pretty obvious he was messed up on something. There was even a point where Bill Hader was having a conversation with somebody else, and he was like, "Yo, man, could I have some privacy?" And he wouldn't give him any privacy, so he told him to butt out. And then he spent the rest of the night mean-mugging Bill Hader, which I take serious offense to because I love Bill Hader. Eventually, an argument broke out between Rob and Nick. Nobody really knows exactly what they were arguing over, but likely we can assume he was acting erratically, likely messed up on something. So they were probably talking to him about going back into rehab treatment, getting clean again, not embarrassing them, not making a fool of himself, possibly cutting him off financially, which they've done multiple times in the past, which then led to an argument, especially if he was messed up. And it ended in them deciding to leave the party. Rob and Michele decided to leave like immediately. And then at some point, we don't really know when, Nick also decided to leave. The next time that we see Nick, he's actually leaving his parents' home on December 13th. He goes and checks into the Pierside Santa Monica Hotel at 4 a.m. The front desk staff says that there was no signs of any sort of physical altercation, no blood, nothing out of the ordinary. Everything seemed normal when he arrived. But the next day, on Sunday morning, when he officially leaves the hotel and checks out, which seems like a weird stint for him to stay just overnight in a hotel. But when he leaves, the cleaning crew goes in and they find a bathtub full of blood. The bed was completely covered in blood. They find tons of blood all over the sheets, and there's sheets that have been hung up covering the windows. Real suspicious. At about 2:30 p.m. at the Reiners Brentwood mansion in LA, a massage therapist shows up and starts ringing the bell so they can be let in, but there's no response, no answer. They stay for a few more minutes, continuing to buzz. Maybe they're asleep, maybe they just don't hear it, whatever. Still nothing. So finally, this person decides, well, their daughter, Romy, lives right across the street, so I can just give her a call. Maybe she can let me in, and then I can get on with my massage therapy job. Romy shows up. She has no luck getting a hold of them or being able to get through the gate either, so she uses her key. She goes inside. There's conflicting reports saying that she went in with this massage therapist. There's other reports saying that she went in with a close friend. There's also reports saying that she went in by herself. We don't really know. What we do know is that Romy walks into the house. She's looking for her parents. She goes into the bathroom, and unfortunately, she finds a brutal, brutal scene of Rob Reiner having been stabbed multiple times with a giant wound across his neck. She's so freaked out at this point, she bolts out of the house, immediately calls the police. Right after that, she phones Billy Crystal, who would be kind of like an uncle to her. And this all happens at 3:30 p.m. A lot of people are pointing out the eerie coincidences with the number 33 consistently popping up in a lot of these random disappearances. Both Michele and Rob had been brutally, brutally taken out. The first responders showed up, but no life-saving measures could be performed. The police show up. They quickly rule this a homicide. And talking to Romy, one of the first things she says is, you really need to look into my brother, Nick. He has to be a main suspect. He's been mentally unstable. He has a history of drug use. And I would say because of the tension going on between him and my parents, he's been living in their guest house for a while. There's a good chance that he might have something to do with this. So, of course, he becomes suspect number one. Just real quick, I do want to note that it's always some random person. It's a massage therapist. Actually, it's a lot of times a massage therapist or a housekeeper or an assistant or some third-party person that is planned to go expose this whole thing happening the day of. Like, it just so happens that they had a massage therapy appointment scheduled for that day. I don't know. Maybe it means something. Maybe it means nothing. But why is it always some weird third-party rando? Doing a quick scan of the scene, police realized there was no forced entry, which typically means that they know the perpetrator, or the doors were unlocked. It quickly narrows it down for them, making it a very open and shut case. Our guy has to be Nick Reiner. We have these random, like, street cam CCTV footage showing Nick, but he seems pretty chill, kind of out of it. I don't know. He seems like he's not in any way trying to hide. He's not in any way trying to evade the law. I don't know. Almost seems like nothing happened that he would be worried about. Then at about 9:15 p.m. on December 14th, somewhere near the University of Southern California campus, police roll up and they arrest Nick. Giant, massive wave of cops. They all move in. He was arrested without incident, taken into custody, and he was being held on an initial $4 million bail. But since this morning, that has been changed to no bail at all, and he is facing first-degree unaliving charges for both his mom and his dad, which adds like extreme circumstances to the charges as well, looking at life in prison and the possibility of the death penalty. And of course, the biggest question on everybody's minds is why? What happened? Why did this happen? Why did he lose his shit and freak out on his parents? Classic Menendez brothers situation. And the news media just likes to think that labeling him a drug addict and someone who's been to rehab 18 times and struggles with mental health disorders because he is a diagnosed schizophrenic, that is the reason. He just was crazy and an addict, and so that's why he did this awful thing. But that's not good enough for me, because I know tons of addicts out there that also have mental health issues that have never taken a life before. So it doesn't seem like necessarily an answer, a good reason why. And then at his court date this morning, Nick didn't show up because, well, he was not cleared medically to leave the jail, so I guess he couldn't show up for court. Things just seem really weird. You can clearly see how Nick truly feels about the addict lifestyle, because I found this really random video. The poster is Nick Reiner. There's only one single video called dddavid, and it's super weird. Has him toking the devil's lettuce a bunch, has him just being super random and weird and funny. I personally got a kick out of it, but I don't know. It almost seems like he's trying his skills at making films, making movies, videos, trying to keep up with what his dad expects his image to be, living up to that dad reputation.
Now if you see me in the lab coat, don't think I'm just chilling. I'm rubbing my palms together. Got plans on taking the building like the beating stock. Like these busters getting blocked. Us niggas be getting mobbed from the floors that we rock.
Oh look, there's one of your fans now.
That's Barbara. She's blind, so that's why she didn't see the wave.
Going to a party.
You used to be good, right, Roger? You bought heroin off a transvestite? No. You guys aren't lost, are you?
No. My mouth is getting a little parched because of how much I'm talking to y'all, but
Anyway, we really haven't delved into anything deep, so.
But I do know that his lawyer's name is Alan Jackson. He's a pretty famous lawyer these days. He's got a bunch of high-profile cases, but his name's also Alan Jackson, spelled exactly the same, which is super sick. Hopefully he's able to work some Chattahoochee magic. One of the things that caught my attention pretty seriously was the fact that every news report remarks on how long Nick has been addicted to drugs, how long this has been going on, since his early teens. Now, I know from personal experience that that kind of substance abuse doesn't start for no reason. It's a way of hiding or masking or suppressing trauma or just different feelings that you don't know how to handle. So I immediately was wondering, what kind of trauma did Nick experience? And it didn't take long before I found an answer. One of the first things that I found was this roast of Rob Reiner and this guy Al Franken. He's a former comedian, actor, screenwriter, turned American politician. He was like a senator or governor of Minnesota for a while. But he comes up and he has some real raw jokes about Carl Reiner explicitly abusing Rob Reiner when he was a child, passing him around to all of his Hollywood friends, very similar to the rings that we are very familiar with nowadays.
And Rob doesn't like to talk about it because he's kind of a modest guy. See, as a baby, Rob was routinely beaten by his father, Carl. On a typical night, Carl would slip into Rob's bed, roll him over, swab him down, and say something like, "I'm thinking about hiring Maury Amsterdam to play Buddy Sorrell. What do you think?" Carl started inviting many of his famous friends to son. No, and all kidding aside, thank you for doing so much to make sure that no other kid ends up like you.
Of course, Al Franken is a comedian. Of course, he is friends with Rob Reiner. And of course, this is a roast. So everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. One of the things that I've always learned, I think I'm pretty funny. I was class clown in high school. But one of the biggest pieces of comedy is there being little tidbits of truth that you sprinkle in there so that the story almost is like partial truth, partial fabrication. So it makes you really wonder, did this really happen to Rob? And did he pass that cycle of abuse on to Nick Reiner? Of course, everybody cites it as his intense feelings of shame and guilt for not being able to live up to his dad's legendary reputation. And I could certainly validate that that seems like a fair reason to abuse substances in the first place. I don't know, maybe not that young. I don't feel like he was experiencing that stuff at that age. That's the prime age for you to be exploited, though, especially as a child who is already emotionally damaged. So that would be another piece of the puzzle that would indicate that it was in fact Nick Reiner who took his parents out, Menendez brothers style. Rob Reiner followed in his dad's footsteps nearly every step of the way, so it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that he also got involved with this wealthy, elite, trafficking, exploitation, blackmail, whatever you want to call it, cabal. And if that did happen, and Nick was certainly subjected to that kind of abuse, it would make total sense as to why he has such intense substance abuse problems, leaving us with a classic Menendez brothers situation, being abused by your dad for so long that you finally just snap and take out your parents. I don't know. And then I found out, yes, he did, because he would make Nick make out with him in order to make up from these fights they were having on the set of the movie they wrote together, Being Charlie, all about Nick's drug issues. So weird. There's no way around it. The official story seems pretty tight, seems pretty solid. Not a whole lot of holes to poke in. But to me, the motive just doesn't seem like it's there, and it feels like it's a perfect opportunity to cash in on this completely broken and emotional state following a very public and high-profile argument that was had at a Conan O'Brien holiday party, likely with lots of other famous guests. So it seemed like the perfect time for them to move in, utilize this mental state and the situation that Nick is in to create this whole setup of him being a patsy for the unaliving of his parents. One of the main reasons people are speculating about this is because of this jacket that Nick was wearing in one of these interviews, and it's a Castle Rock Entertainment jacket, which at face value isn't too weird because it's his dad's company. But the fact that he's wearing it during these interviews, and these interviews are always a little bit weird, uncomfortable, seem to exhibit signs that maybe he will do something a little bit wild in the future and he's not fully recovered, mildly unstable.
I mean, we get into issues, and I would see, the whole process for me, I can just speak for myself, it did make me understand him a lot more, and I think it made me a better father. Hopefully it did. I don't know, but I think that, and you'll see it in the film, what happens is, your kid, if your kid is going through rough times, the parent your main job is to keep your child safe. So
Now they say that Nick was actually arrested in this Castle Rock jacket. I can't really say that for sure because I don't know what the back of the jacket looks like, because in these photos, he's clearly being arrested with what looks to be like a fireman's jacket on, with like the giant yellow bands. So we really don't know, at least not yet. But the word on the streets is that he was wearing this jacket, which was supposed to be a sign of what he did and why. Now let's say for a second that this jacket was intended to be a sign of something darker. What would he be referencing? In my humble opinion, I think he would be referencing the intense trauma, possibly sexual abuse that he experienced underneath the Castle Rock Entertainment umbrella, being involved with his father and his father's elite friends and political friends, and possibly a satanic ritual cult that people suspect Hillary's a part of. If he was a part of any of this, then it would make a lot of sense that he wears this jacket and lets people know that he did this for that reason. It's because of Castle Rock Entertainment and how traumatized it left me. And people also speculate that maybe he was involved in some sort of programming. We've been talking a lot about the whole programming thing in the last few weeks with Anna Nicole Smith and Marilyn Monroe. It's very possible that he was exposed to some sort of MK Ultra style brainwashing, mind-altering experience. And one of the biggest things that people are talking about right now is these Sanpaku Eyes. And I'd never heard of this before, but it definitely seems like a thing. Look at all these different people who are obviously crazy, and they definitely have Sanpaku Eyes. Now, my first thought was that's what people's eyes look like when they're really messed up on something. I know from personal experience. But part of the MK Ultra program is continuously dosing these young people and these vulnerable people with different drugs to try and aid in the brainwashing, as well as help them create these different personalities so that the trauma splits into one personality and then another personality is formed, which could be programmed to be, say, a Manchurian Candidate or a sex kitten or whatever. They utilize these splitting of personalities to their advantage to program this new personality the way that they want them to be. So is he just strung out, or does he have Sanpaku eyes, psychopathic killer eyes? The other thing about Nick that I felt really indicates he might have been programmed or brainwashed is the fact that all of his social media was removed, deleted, completely taken down. He wasn't allowed to have social media. And that seems like handler / brainwashing MK Ultra 101, isolation. Also, this picture of Carl and Rob Reiner, like, kind of making out, definitely gives more credibility to the possible SA situation. I don't know, just saying. But this whole thing with the Castle Rock jacket has unearthed this Q post from 2020. It's post 4414, and it reads this: EAM loyalists. Red 1, POTUS Twitter removal. Red 2, Central Communications blackout, continental U.S. Red 3, CLAS movement, Pelosi or Pence. Red 4, movement of MIL assets, 10th Mountain, 1st Marine, CPSD, Marine, QVIR. Don't know what any of that is. To central locations under the guise of citizen riot control. So it sounds like they're making a military state. Red 5, Nat Mil Comsen, National Military Communications Center. Red 6, Secretary of Defense, Instruct 1, USSS. And then the last part is Castle Rock, Q. So this Castle Rock thing blew up a long time ago. And this is what led us to looking into Castle Rock Entertainment. And that's how we found out that they were involved in creating these fake Oval Office scenes. I mentioned this before. It has since come out that the Trump administration has exposed the entire Eisenhower room, like West Wing of the White House, where they set up this artificial Oval Office for Joe Biden, where he did most of his, speeches or videos where he took the booster shot or whatever. He was doing it all out of this fake Oval Office. They would even have reporters come in to make it look more real. But there were so many giveaways before this whole Trump administration released this information that led people to believe that this was in fact a fake set, having to do with the parking lot that is visible in the back, which would not be visible at the White House. The random, fully bloomed, beautiful flowers that are seen outside the window that look entirely fake. Apparently, there's some videos or images where Trump actually walks by in one of the windows, and I couldn't find them because they were all dead links, but if you can find them, that exists. People mention there's no markings on his desk. They say that the whole reason they wanted to do this was to preserve the actual Oval Office from constantly being set up and torn down and trampled in with tons of people. Okay, sure. Take a quick look at this video where Biden is talking with Putin. If you look at the library of books, maybe this was intentional, maybe it's not, but it certainly seems like it was. It says, I lie in the books. What's that? I mean, we already know that, but what is that? And the Oval Office thing isn't even the weirdest part about Joe Biden's presidency. There's this video showing that there was literally nobody at his inauguration, literally nobody.
There's 100 people at the Biden inauguration, and it's dystopian. So there's nobody here. There's more people up here with the press overlooking the Capitol than there are at the inauguration. It's the most bizarre scene you ever saw in your life.
And then there's this whole thing where they say Trump played this practical joke on him and didn't leave the keys for the White House, as if there's only one single key. Come on, dude. And so him and his wife got locked out of the Oval Office and they weren't even able to get into the White House. on Inauguration Day, all thanks to Trump and his antics. That's weird. How often does something like that happen? So the inauguration was empty, they couldn't get in the White House, and then Biden has to build a fake Oval Office set where he operates out of. Maybe he couldn't actually be the president because he only won through manipulation of the votes. I really don't know why this happened. I really have trouble understanding their motives behind building this extra Oval Office, behind the inauguration, and the whole locked out of the White House thing. It just doesn't make sense, but it also feels so wrong and weird and gives me not the warm fuzzies, whatever the opposite of that is, the cold pricklies. And taking all of that into consideration, the weirdest thing I found was this new art installment they put in the West Wing of the White House. It shows every single president since the beginning of our presidents, and it gets all the way up to Joe Biden, and then it's just a hand signing something. There's no picture of Joe Biden. That's so weird. I don't even know what to make of it. Definitely means something. There's no way this means nothing, and it's hella interesting. But I found this other video from a while ago, and this guy actually shows that the Oval Office that we're seeing in all of these clips is actually the very same Oval Office they have at the Culver Studios in Los Angeles.
Last week I reported on the Castle Rock Studios here in Culver City, also known as Amazon Studios, and the video's gotten out now of Joe Biden at in his Oval Office at basically Castle Rock Studios. So here's the view, and then they go in, and here's Biden in front of his window like we've seen, okay? Just like we see up here in this picture. Notice where the black SUV is, okay? So let's watch that again. All right, so let's look at that upper awning, and then let's look at the aerial imagery over here. So this is Amazon Studios, and look at that ledge. The same exact ledge. So me, being a photographer, I can tell you right now where they're at. So they're standing right here, and he's looking left, to his left, at that ledge, okay? Watch as I play this video. You'll see as he turns. You see a red building. When he turns to his right, look what's right there. A bright red building. This just gets better and better, okay? And then we're gonna play again. And now look where his window is. There's that black SUV, okay? And then there's a work truck up here, and I have another shot, all right? So if we look at the aerial imagery right here, and we spin this around, that is right where that black SUV would be parked, okay? And they've also put a gigantic tree to cover up what's going on right here, so you can't see from helicopters and everything. So this huge tree that's so big that the branches don't come down to the window like they do in Donald Trump's picture of his White House, of his Oval Office. So he has those low branches that come down like we saw at the actual street view of the Oval Office at the White House. They have this gigantic tree to block what's going on here, so you can't see these reporters like we just saw in this video all congregating here before they shuffle in to film him pretending to be the president. So let's see it again. Red building, driveway, fence, yeah, it's all there. It's exactly where he is, and that's exactly why that big tree is there.
And I've looked at it myself on Google Maps, and you can see this landmark. You can see the giant tree. You can see all of these different things. And then the camera pans around and heads right inside to this Joe Biden, some sort of public address. Who knows? He's wearing a mask, so we don't even know if it's the real Joe Biden or one of the numerous clones out there. I mean, look at this clone. He's like 9 feet tall compared to his wife. And in this picture, he's not nearly as tall compared to his wife. There's also the weird not blinking Joe Biden. He never blinks when anything happens.
You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cop. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American. Donald Trump lacked the courage to act. The brave women and men in blue all across this nation
should never forget that.
And then there's the whole comment that Trump made, like right before he got elected during the actual presidential elections. And he says,
we're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president. Just to clear, they throw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president, Mr. President, that doesn't know he's alive.
where is our president? And honestly, I don't know if that's what he meant to say, but he's right. We have a president. He doesn't know if he's alive, and we didn't know if he was alive. Now we're getting all these reports saying that he's got prostate cancer and all blah, blah, blah. But we have no idea. Nobody's seen Joe Biden. And when we do, he seems like he's in way better health than he really should be. Something's weird with the Joe Biden stuff. But what this video pointed out is that the studios they are filming out of are Castle Rock Entertainment studios that exist within the Culver Studios massive complex. It eventually got sold and is now Amazon Studios. Before they sold it, it was obviously Castle Rock. And this would have been about the same time that they were actively filming random Joe Biden videos in this fake Oval Office. I don't know. The theories online are that he was just a fake president. He was just a talking head. He wasn't actually running the country. There's a secret, evil cabal of people behind Joe Biden that is actually running the country. People like James Clapper and John Brennan, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, President Obama, Jeffrey Epstein, lots of people. The other thing that I found, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video, is that Rob Reiner made a film called The American President. This film had an exact copy of the Oval Office. This replica was not just used for that movie. They say it was also used in episodes of The West Wing. It was also used in episodes or movies outside of that so that people could use this direct replica of the Oval Office. And when you look at this replica compared to, say, Trump's Oval Office, it's very different. But when you look at the replica compared to Biden's Oval Office, his fake Oval Office, I guess, there are tons of similarities between the two. The curtain colors, the arrangement of the photos, just everything that's in there is more reminiscent of this fake setup when it comes to Joe Biden's Oval Office, which lends even more credence to the fact that Rob Reiner might have been in charge of setting up this entire fake operation with the Democratic Party. He's a part of some sort of major psyop going on. Then he hosts these events at the White House, lending even more credibility to the fact that he has some really close ties with the president, people in politics, I don't know, people in high places, obviously. But if things are darker than that, it made me wonder why. And I mentioned before the whole JFK series that he started in 2023. The latest episode that he posted in that series just dropped on December 13th. This is a 2-year-long continuous expose on the CIA's involvement and cover-up of the JFK assassination. That's pretty huge. And obviously he wasn't stopping. He was grinding super hard. So he's clearly looking to expose certain CIA secrets. Then if you take into account all of his political ties and connections, him knowing about this whole fake studio set and their reasons behind it, possibly knowing deeper, darker secrets that these political friends have either shared with him or he's been around to hear about, it seems like maybe there's some political motivation to take this guy out. We've got a grand jury investigation going on into James Clapper and John Brennan, both guys who falsified this whole Russia hoax thing. And this interview between all three of these guys is just the biggest propaganda piece I've ever seen in my life. Just them talking about how much of a problem and how dangerous Russia really is. And why does he hate Trump so much? Seriously, every Twitter post is like something having to do with hating on Trump. Everything that he does in his professional career seems to be going after Trump. He was heading the committee to try and prosecute Trump. He was falsifying a complete story about Russian intervention to prosecute Trump. So it seems pretty interesting, and it seems like a quick way to make an enemy. Then if we take into account Trump's response to his death, being completely nonchalant and saying that it's possibly a good thing because he was so anti-Trump, deranged from Trump derangement syndrome, it's probably a good thing, which is wild for him to say, and certainly implicates him in being a possible suspect.
Your statement on Truth Social after the murder of Rob Reiner, do you stand by that post?
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. The Russia hoax, he was one of the people behind it. I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome.
It's also said that Rob Reiner's new series about Donald Trump and Putin was going to be released very soon. It was going to be a 10 to 13 part series, and it was probably going to expose some pretty serious stuff that maybe Trump didn't want exposed. This is called The Spy and the Asset, and of course it wasn't released, which is one of the main reasons people suspect Trump or someone within his organization, possibly the CIA, who doesn't want any of their secrets exposed. One of them could very well be responsible for taking him out. Also, the system is really the problem. It has nothing to do with Republican or Democrat. It's a really malicious, messed up grind of a system that will chew people up and spit them out unless you reform and accept what it takes to be in political office. It just made me feel too much like the whole Epstein situation, him being silenced before he had the opportunity to be indicted and then let some secret slip that he really shouldn't in order to save his own ass. And speaking of Epstein, there's another piece of this that led me to believe that this might have been more political than we're led to believe. Rob Reiner was a huge advocate for both Clintons, but particularly Hillary Clinton in 2015. In fact, he held numerous fundraiser events at his home in Brentwood in order to raise substantial funding for her campaign and aid her in being elected. Now, this does very, very much overlap with the time period where there is numerous flight logs showing both Hillary and Bill Clinton headed to Epstein Island, showing their deep, deep ties with Epstein and whatever he was involved with. And then we also have this list showing Rob Reiner's name very specifically right here on it next to Rita Wilson, Tom Hanks's wife. So he was just 6 degrees from Epstein because of his Clinton ties, and likely many other ties to big political, famous Hollywood figures. And yet, there's no speculation about this being related to anything Epstein, and we may never actually know if Rob Reiner had anything to do with it because, well, the Epstein files and tapes will never be released. And if that's not enough to convince you that there's got to be some links to Epstein, in one of the Epstein file batches, it's alleged that one of the code names was Castle Rock. And if that's true, then yet again, Castle Rock pops up and might mean something, might mean nothing, but what the hell is with all the Castle Rock references? Which makes me go right back to that Paul Myhill guy who was in charge of the Silent Children Project, who lives in Castle Rock. It may mean nothing, but it is super, super coincidentally weird. And I mean, we've got multiple pictures of Rob Reiner with tons of powerful people, including both of the Clintons. And I'm sure by now most of you guys have heard this, but let's just put a little cherry on top of all these crazy political connections and eerie timing as well. But the evening that Rob and his wife passed away, they were expected to have a dinner date with Barack and Big Mike Obama.
Michelle Obama told Jimmy Kimmel that she and Barack Obama were supposed to meet with the Reiners on the day they were killed. Sean?
I know you and your husband were friends with Rob and Michelle Reiner, and I'm very sorry for your loss.
We've known them for many, many years, and we were supposed to be seeing them that night. Let me just say this, unlike some people, they cared about their family, and they cared about this country, and they cared about fairness and equity. And that is the truth. I do know them.
Wonder what they were having dinner about, especially in light of all these grand jury investigations who are definitely looking into Obama, these directors of the CIA, likely Rob Reiner.
Ultimately, we had a whistleblower who came forward that brought some critical pieces to this story. And we were able to discover these documents and find these documents that really pointed to President Obama directing his national security leaders in James Clapper and John Brennan to manufacture this January 2017 intelligence community assessment. The investigation that I led at ODNI that we released last week, Friday, provided a lot of those foundational building blocks and proof for what we know happened.
Just makes you wonder. So I don't know, things are certainly divided right now. There's people who think that Nick really did it, There's speculation out there that maybe Trump was the one responsible, or people within his cabinet. There's speculation out there that maybe it was somebody having to do with the Democratic Party or this elite network of people not wanting secrets exposed. There are so many different theories going on right now, and likely because we have so little evidence and so little information to go off of, everything is kind of up in the air. We're waiting to get more information to make a solid decision. These are the interesting things that I found looking into it that go beyond the normal headlines. And just a quick little aside to go along with that, the fact that both Rob and his wife Michele were taken out, it would indicate either it was Nick and he had a vendetta against his parents, or his wife, who was very much involved in all of their humanitarian efforts and their advocacies for children and their ties to all these politicians. She was always right there by his side, so she likely knew all of the same information that he knew. And maybe it was another case of them just knowing a little too much, and the fear of them saying a little too much was so great that they finally took him out. Either that, or Nick is fully insane and killed his parents for some unknown reason. But as always, I want to know what you guys think. Feel free to drop it in the comments what your theory is, if you found anything interesting that I didn't talk about, and if there's any new developments that come up. I'm going to try and start figuring out how to live stream just generally. I'm not very good at it. It makes me nervous, but I feel like I'm going to try and do more of that. I've also got a discussion coming up later today with Ron, so check that out if you've got some time at 1 p.m. We're going to be discussing the JonBenet Ramsey case. And of course, if you like the episode, please make sure you like it. If you're able to hype the video, please hype it up. Definitely subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads. Because I hear people all the time tell me that they don't see my uploads. And likely because YouTube is suppressing me because of the nature of the channel. Who knows? But that's all I got for you guys this week. I really appreciate you sitting and chilling with me for this long. And I look forward to doing this again with you guys next week for another one. But until then, sleep safe, stay sober, and consider this. Rosie O'Donnell posted that she will no longer be posting anything negative or antagonistic about Donald Trump. And she urges the rest of the liberal side of things to do the same thing. She says that we just need to come together and be loving, and I fully support that, and I think that's great. But I also feel like she might just be scared, because guess who was talking mad trash about Donald Trump for years and was planning to expose him and Putin, supposedly, and was also going to be helping with the upcoming presidential election. So maybe they are legitimately scared of Trump after what happened to Rob Reiner.
I had just come from therapy, and my therapist was saying the same exact thing, that, grief is a positive thing to go through with all that's happening now in our country, and rage is not. So to give this narcissist no power is the only thing that's going to affect him. None. Do not say his name. Do not. And I heard what you said loud and clear, and I'm like, good for you. And I love your posts. I think you're very poignant and very inspiring, and thank you for doing them. Thank you.
Food for thought. All right, sobers, cut. That's a wrap, everybody. Let's go home.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Let's go.